All right, buckle up, because we're about to drop you smack in the middle of one of the most fascinating, brutal, and mind-blowing civilizations that ever walked this earth. We're talking about ancient Sumer, 2600 BC, the cradle of civilization itself. And here's the cold, hard truth. You wouldn't last a single day. Not because you're weak, not because you're dumb, but because nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, in your modern life has prepared you for what daily existence looked like in Mesopotamia over 4,000 years ago. So let's walk through it, hour by hour, decision by decision. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll be kissing your air conditioning and your running water like they're long-lost relatives. The moment that burning sun creeps over the flat, endless plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the city of is already wide awake. And I mean wide awake. There's no alarm clock, no snooze button, no, just 5 more minutes. The roosters, the donkeys, the merchants, they don't care about your sleep schedule. You open your eyes, assuming you actually slept, which, spoiler alert, is a whole other nightmare we'll get to, and you're lying on a reed mat on a mud brick floor. No mattress, no pillow, just you, the hard earth, and whatever insects decided to share your space overnight. And in Sumer, they had plenty of insects. The marshlands, the irrigation canals, the standing water, mosquitoes were basically the unofficial national bird. Now, does that give you the creeps? Can you imagine waking up every single morning like that? Not as a camping trip, but as your life? You stumble up, and here's your first problem. You have no idea what time it is. No phone, no clock. The Sumerians tracked time through sundials and water clocks, but those belonged to temples and officials. Regular folks, you read the sky like a book, and if you don't know how, you're already off schedule. First thing you'd want in the morning is a glass of water, right? Maybe some coffee? Ha! Dream on, buddy. The water in Sumer came from the canals. The same canals used for irrigation, for washing, and let's be honest, for dumping waste. The Sumerians were actually pioneers of irrigation engineering. No joke. They built an extraordinary network of canals that turned a dry, harsh landscape into fertile farmland. Respect where it's due. But drinking that water raw? That's a one-way ticket to a week of misery that would make you wish you'd just stayed on the mat. Most people drank beer instead. And before you start cheering, this wasn't your craft IPA from a trendy bar. Sumerian beer was thick, warm, murky, made from fermented barley, and you drank it through a reed straw to filter out the solid chunks. Yeah, chunks. So your morning drink is a lukewarm, chunky grain soup with a buzz. How's that sitting with you? Still think ancient civilizations were romantic? The thing is, the Sumerians were absolutely on to something. Fermentation kills bacteria. They didn't know the science, but they figured out the survival hack. Still, your modern stomach, used to filtered, treated, purified water? It would take weeks to adapt. In 24 hours, you'd be down for the count. Here's the menu for this morning. Flatbread baked on a clay griddle, some dried fish if you're lucky, lentils or chickpeas if someone got up early to cook them, and maybe to a smear of date paste if you knew the right people. Sounds simple enough, right? Except you didn't just find this food in a pantry. Everything in Sumer required work that started days or weeks before. The grain had to be harvested, dried, ground by hand using stone mills, backbreaking hours-long labor, mixed and baked fresh every morning. And that grinding, that was almost always done by women, on their knees, pushing heavy stone against stone. Researchers who've studied ancient skeletal remains from this region found severe wear on the knee joints and lower spine of women, consistent with hours of daily grinding. Every single day. No days off, no weekends, no, let's just order in tonight. So when you sit down for your humble Sumerian breakfast, just remember, someone's knees paid for that flatbread. Does that hit different? Because it should. Now, what are you doing with your day? In Sumer, there was no figuring out your passion or following your calling. Society was rigidly organized, and your role was largely determined by your birth. The social hierarchy went something like this. At the top, you had the Lugal, the king, who was also considered the earthly representative of the gods. Then came the priests and temple administrators, who controlled enormous amounts of wealth and land. Below them, the scribes, merchants, and skilled craftspeople. And at the bottom, the vast majority of the population, farmers, laborers, and slaves. If you're doing the math on where a random time traveler with no connections, no Sumerian language skills, and no trade knowledge lands on that pyramid, yeah, you're at the bottom. Congratulations. Your day would likely involve working the fields, and not with a tractor, not with a horse-drawn plow. You are talking about manual labor under a Mesopotamian sun that regularly pushed above 110 degrees Fahrenheit in summer. You're in rough, woven linen clothing, no sunscreen, no hat worth mentioning, no electrolyte drinks. Just you, a hoe made of wood and clay, and an endless stretch of cracked earth that needs turning. Can you picture yourself out there? 8, 10, 12 hours under that sun, every muscle screaming, knowing you'll be back tomorrow and the day after? And here's the kicker. A huge portion of what you produce doesn't even belong to you. The temple takes its cut. The palace takes its cut. What's left is yours to survive on. Let's not skip over this because it's a massive problem that most people don't think about. You don't speak Sumerian, not a word. And Sumerian isn't related to any modern language. It's a language isolate, meaning linguists have found 0 confirmed relatives. It stands completely alone in human history. So you wake up in and literally everyone around you is speaking in a language that has no connection to anything you've ever heard. The sounds, the grammar, the structure, everything is alien. You can't ask for help. You can't explain who you are. You can't understand orders being given to you. In a society that ran on strict social roles and clear communication, where a misunderstood order from a temple official could mean serious punishment, being mute and confused is dangerous. You'd be seen as strange at best, suspicious at worst. Doesn't that just knock the wind out of you? You're surrounded by thousands of people, and you're completely, utterly alone in the most fundamental way. Now, let's be fair here, because in 2600 BC was genuinely breathtaking in certain ways. This was not a collection of mud huts. This was a city, a real, dense, complex urban environment with a population that some estimates put between 50,000 and 80,000 people, which made it one of the largest cities on the planet at the time. The streets were narrow and winding, packed with mud brick buildings that could rise 2 or 3 stories. There were workshops for pottery, metalworking, weaving. There were marketplaces, the Tamkarum, merchant traders who dealt in textiles, metals, grain, and luxury goods from as far away as the Indus Valley and Afghanistan. There was long-distance trade happening. There was writing, the earliest writing system in human history, cuneiform, being pressed into clay tablets right there in the temple complexes. The great ziggurat of Ur, a massive stepped temple tower, loomed over everything. It was the house of Nana, the moon god. And it wasn't just a religious symbol. The ziggurat complex was the economic engine of the city. The temple owned land. The temple managed grain storage. The temple employed workers, kept records, redistributed resources. In many ways, the temple was the government and the bank rolled into one. So there's real civilization here, real complexity, real human ingenuity. But here's what the history books leave out: the smell. Open sewers ran along the streets. Animals, donkeys, goats, cattle lived alongside humans in the lower quarters. Tanneries processed animal hides. Fermentation vats bubbled in every other courtyard. Fish were dried in the open air. And in the summer heat, all of that hit you like a wall. Your 21st century nose, accustomed to deodorant and indoor plumbing and scented candles, you would have been destroyed. Completely and totally destroyed. By midday, the heat in southern Mesopotamia in summer is not playing games. We're talking about a climate that in 2600 BC was slightly wetter than today, but still intensely hot. You'd be looking at temperatures that would shut down a modern construction site. The Sumerians adapted with thick mud brick walls that retained cool air in the mornings, shaded inner courtyards, and a general understanding that you don't do heavy outdoor labor during peak sun hours if you can help it. There was a kind of informal midday rest, not a modern siesta exactly, but a slowing down of activity. But if you're a field worker or a laborer, you don't get that luxury. You keep going, or you fall behind. And falling behind in a system of strict quotas and temple oversight was not just a personal failure. It could mean losing your ration allocation, your food, because that's the other thing. In Sumer, many workers weren't paid in currency. They received rations, measured allocations of barley, oil, and sometimes beer, distributed by the temple or the palace. You worked, you got rations. You didn't work, or you worked poorly, or your overseer simply didn't like you, the rations got cut. It was a system of survival where the margin for error was razor thin. No safety net, no sick days, no HR department to file a complaint with. Now let's say you're out there under that brutal sun and something goes wrong. Maybe you twisted your ankle. Maybe you've got an infected cut from working in the fields. Maybe the water got to you and you're feeling the full wrath of whatever bacteria decided to take up residence in your digestive system. What do? Well, the Sumerians actually had a medical tradition that was surprisingly developed for its time. They had physician priests who used a combination of herbal remedies, practical treatments, and ritual incantations. Some of the world's earliest medical texts come from Mesopotamia. Clay tablets describing treatments for specific ailments using plants, minerals, and animal products. For wounds, they used things like castor oil, pine resin, and various plant poultices, some of which modern research suggests actually had legitimate antimicrobial properties. So they weren't completely shooting in the dark. But here's the catch. Medicine and religion were completely intertwined. Illness was not seen purely as a physical problem. It was understood as a sign of divine disfavor, that you had somehow offended the gods, or that a demon had taken hold of you. So treatment involved rituals, prayers, offerings to the appropriate deity, and incantations spoken by trained priests. If you rolled up to the healer in Ur with a raging stomach infection, the treatment plan would involve both drinking something herbal and performing a ceremony to appease the god responsible for your suffering. And if the herbal remedy didn't work, well, clearly the ritual wasn't performed correctly, or your sin was too great. Now honestly, does that give you the chills? Because those people weren't dumb. They were working with the best framework they had. But for your modern body, used to antibiotics and sterile environments, a simple infection that we knock out with a 3-day prescription in 2024 could have taken you out entirely in 2600 BC. Let's say you survived the morning. You've eaten your flatbread, you've done your labor, you've avoided anything catastrophic. Now comes the afternoon, and with it, social navigation. And this, honestly, might be the thing that gets you faster than anything else. Sumerian society was built on deeply ingrained codes of conduct, hierarchies that were not just social preferences, but religious obligations. How you greeted someone depended on their status. How you addressed a priest versus a merchant versus a fellow laborer. There were specific forms, specific gestures, specific ways of standing and speaking. Getting it wrong wasn't just awkward, it was offensive. An insult to someone of higher status could bring very real consequences: public humiliation, loss of your ration, or worse, an accusation before the temple authorities. And the legal system? Oh, we need to talk about the legal system. Sumer gave the world some of its earliest written law codes. The Code of Ur-Nammu, which dates to around 2100 BC, but reflects legal traditions going back much further. outlined punishments for everything from physical assault to property disputes to marriage violations. The courts were run by the temples. Witnesses gave testimony. Evidence was presented. It was more sophisticated than most people realize. But the punishments? Fines, enslavement for debt, forced labor, and if you were at the bottom of the social ladder with no family connections, no patron, no one to speak for you, the system was not going to bend in your favor. You, as a clueless time traveler with no social ties, no language, no cultural knowledge, you'd be one misunderstanding away from a situation you couldn't talk your way out of. As the sun drops toward the horizon and the relentless heat begins to ease, the city shifts into a different kind of energy. The markets begin to wind down. The smell of cooking fires fills the air. Barley stew, roasted fish, flatbreads going on the clay griddles for the evening meal. And as night approaches, the religious life of Sumer kicks into full gear. Because here's something that's hard for modern people to really wrap their heads around. The Sumerians did not separate religion from regular life. There was no such separation. The gods, and there were hundreds of them, were not distant, abstract beings. They were present, active, personally involved in the daily affairs of human beings. Enlil, god of wind and storms and the breath of life. Enki, god of wisdom, water and magic, the clever trickster who actually liked humans. Inanna, goddess of love, war and desire, one of the most complex and powerful figures in all of ancient religion. Nanna, the moon god, whose great ziggurat towered over Ur itself. These weren't just names on a temple wall. Ordinary Sumerians believed, genuinely, completely, without a shred of doubt, that these beings were watching them, judging them, capable of blessing or punishing them at any moment. The evening rituals were not optional. Prayers at sunset, offerings, a small portion of your food, a bit of beer, something given back to the divine. If you skipped it, if you were seen as impious or disrespectful, you weren't just being rude. You were inviting disaster. Not metaphorical disaster, real, immediate, expected disaster. A crop failure, a flood, illness in your household. Do you feel the weight of that? Every single day lived under that kind of cosmic pressure, where your personal behavior was believed to have direct consequences for everything around you. And now we get to the part that I think would genuinely break most modern people. The night. There is no electricity in Sumer. There are oil lamps, small clay vessels with a wick, burning sesame oil. But they're expensive. They're dim. And most ordinary households couldn't afford to burn them all night. When the sun went down over Ur, the world got dark. Genuinely, profoundly dark in a way that almost no one alive today has ever experienced. If you've ever been far from a city and looked up at a perfectly clear night sky with no light pollution, that's close. Now imagine that's every night. Now imagine you don't have a headlamp, a flashlight, a phone screen. Now imagine the streets outside your mud brick home are narrow, unpaved, unlit, and shared with animals and strangers. Going outside at night in an ancient city was genuinely dangerous, not because of supernatural threats, though the Sumerians absolutely believed in those too, and had elaborate systems of protective amulets and rituals to guard against night demons, but because of basic physical reality. You could fall, you could get robbed, you could get utterly lost in a city whose layout you don't know, in a darkness so complete you couldn't see your own hand. So you stayed in, on your reed mat, on your mud brick floor, with whatever insects and rodents shared your space. And you tried to sleep before the next sunrise started the whole cycle over again. Here's what all the history books skim past, and what the AI reconstruction brings to life in a way nothing else can. The exhaustion. Not just physical exhaustion, though yes, every muscle in your body would be destroyed after one day of Sumerian labor. But mental exhaustion. The constant alertness required to navigate a world where you understood nothing, where every social interaction was a minefield, where illness could come for you at any moment with no reliable way to fight it, where the margin between enough food and not enough food was measured in handfuls of barley. These people were not simple. They were not primitive. They built cities. They invented writing. They mapped the stars. They composed some of the world's first poetry, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, a story about friendship, loss, and the desperate human search for meaning that still makes people cry 4,000 years later. They were fully, completely, deeply human, with fears and jokes and love stories and political dramas and neighborhood gossip and all of it. But the conditions of their lives, the physical reality of existing before modern medicine, before sanitation, before the basic technologies we take for granted, were hard in ways that are almost impossible to truly imagine from the comfort of a couch in the 21st century. Let's be straight with each other. No, you would not survive 24 hours in ancient Sumer, not because ancient people were tougher or smarter than you, though they were absolutely tougher, because they were forged by that toughness from birth, but because you would walk in completely unprepared. No language, no cultural knowledge, no immune system adapted to the local pathogens, no understanding of the social hierarchy, no useful trade skills in a context where your skills are relevant. You'd be sick by noon, socially compromised by afternoon, lost in the dark by nightfall. And yet, and here's the thing that gets me every time I go deep into this history, they thrived. Millions of people lived and loved and built and created and worshipped and argued and celebrated in this exact world. They found joy. They made music. They told stories around fire. The human spirit, doing what the human spirit does, making meaning out of whatever conditions it finds itself in. That's what the AI reconstruction reveals when we peel back the layers. Not just the difficulty, but the humanity. The people behind the clay tablets and the irrigation canals and the ziggurat stones. Sumer wasn't just a chapter in a history textbook. It was a living, breathing, sweating, arguing, praying, laughing world. Just as real and just as chaotic as ours. And we are, in ways that go deeper than most people realize, their direct descendants. The writing you're reading right now? That tradition began in Sumer. The legal codes that underpin modern civilization? Sumer. The concept of the city itself as a unit of human organization? Sumer. So the next time you reach for a cold glass of filtered water, or slip into a clean bed, or wake up with a phone that tells you exactly what time it is, maybe take 1 second, just one, and say a quiet thank you across 4,000 years of history. Because somebody out there, knee-deep in a Mesopotamian irrigation canal under a brutal sun, grinding grain before dawn, praying to Nana under a sky full of stars, they built the foundation you're standing on. And they did it without a single day off. If this blew your mind, you know what to do. Share it with someone who thinks ancient history is boring. They need this wake-up call. And drop in the comments, which ancient civilization do you want us to reconstruct next? Because we're just getting started.